What's up, nerds? Welcome back. This is it. This is the end of it all. Apparently, the Fear State has ended, so let's just talk about Fear State Omega. So I didn't cover the entirety of this event, if it could be called that, the Fear State whole thing, because it wasn't all of that interesting. It wasn't all that innovative. Like, it was kind of sold and billed as though it was this terrifying thing, and right at first I thought, well, there's some potential here. Scarecrow could end up doing some pretty messed up shit, and it just never materialized. Not only that, it seemed like there were three different villains all operating somewhat together but completely independently of each other, each of them basically assuming they were the ones calling the shots. So I mean, there was no real sense of having stakes because each one was doing their own thing and each one was taken down by someone differently. So I mean, I don't even know. I really don't even know. But anyway, let's kind of just talk about what we actually have in this, because the reason why, if you couldn't figure it out, the reason why it was called Fear State was because it was tied to Scarecrow. So, I mean, that's where we're kind of starting out. Scarecrow has been apprehended and he's been held so far, but now they're getting ready to move him. So that's what they're doing, and they have him coming out in the whole, like, Hannibal Lecter type of thing, which, I mean, I don't really know why. Like, he's not really known for trying to bite people's faces off or anything, but apparently that's how they have him. So they're bringing him out, loading him into the transport, like, van or whatever the hell. And he's saying, like, it's a pity you all still have to live in this sad, broken city because you stood in the way of what it could have become. I am a doctor and I saw the cure, but you chose to let the sickness spread and grow. So they're just saying, like, damn it, I thought I told you, like, to have him gag so he can't talk and shit. And anyway, he's saying, like, I can smell your fear, Commissioner Montoya. You don't know how to turn the clock back, and you're too afraid to let it tick forward. So now you're stuck nowhere. And then they just, like, slam the door on him and shit and, like, start transporting him. And they even told the drivers or whatever, like, just don't listen to him, don't pay any attention to him. There's no point. So as they're driving, these two, I'm assuming they're cops or part of SWAT or whatever they're based on how they're dressed. Anyway, they're talking about, like, it's kind of creepy driving. Well, one of them says it's creepy driving around one of the big bads. And these passengers are like, well, I don't really know. Scarecrow counts as, like, one of the big bads. You know what I mean? Which, yeah, I mean, he's definitely a prolific character, but I don't really know if he would be considered one of the big bads or anything. So anyway, he's saying the one that's driving says, like, well, he does, like, qualify now. And then he's saying, like, my grandma nailed herself into, like, the bathroom, and then, like, it was during the Fear State thing, and then when we tried to go and get her out, she tried to attack my dad with a hammer and shit like that. He's saying there's so much fear in this city thanks to him. So he's saying from the back, like, no, the fear was always there, I just tried to use it for something more, productive. So he's saying, like, next time I'll do a better job. And the cop is just like, next time? So that's when they freak out because they see this gigantic scarecrow that's been erected. So they, like, start freaking out. They're like, what the hell is that and shit? So he's sitting in the back there saying, I'm smarter than the average costumed lunatic you're used to in this city. All right, Riddler, calm down. So he says, did you really think I wasn't going to have a plan for this kind of setback? So they start freaking out because all of a sudden they're being approached by a bunch of gun-wielding fake scarecrows. And I say fake scarecrows not because they're, like, made of straw or anything, but because they're just, like, guys dressed up as scarecrows, sort of. They have, like, the hood and shit like that, and the hats. So they're coming up and he's saying, I'm a responsible scientist. Despite what they say on the news, I knew that I couldn't turn my fear bomb on the city without testing it on a few people first. So they start trying to, like, attack the cops, and as he continues to talk, we see all of these, like, various sound effects, like a crack, a crunch, and a snap. So he's assuming, like, okay, great, that means my men did what they were here to do. And he says, I'm sure he still thinks my attack on this city is over, because he's talking about Batman. And then all of a sudden, Batman opens the door and is like, it is. So he's just like, oh, it's you. So, of course, now Batman is like, you know what, since you couldn't be trusted with them, now I'm going to go ahead and take you where you're going. Of course, he's going to Arkham. I'm going to take you myself. So he pulls him out of the van and shit, throws him on the ground. And then he starts telling him, the current in these restraints will knock you unconscious if you try anything. You'll wake up at your destination and you won't see me again. So he's putting him in some more, like, I guess, secure cuffs. But anyway, Creighton tells him, fine, I'll play nice, but quid pro quo. It feels strange to be talking to you naked, so to speak. So he's just like, ugh. he goes and he picks up like one of the masks off the dudes and puts it on him. So he's like, "Ah, oh, thank you, that's so much better." So he says, "I will say I prefer your larger Batmobiles, the tanks rather than the sports cars. They're scarier." To which Batman's like, "Yeah, that's not really the point." And yeah, that's very true. A lot of these cars are just meant for him to be able to pursue them and shit like that. And if we're just gonna be honest here, I don't really like the tanks. I get why he has them or whatever, for like villains and just thugs who use bigger things like bazookas and grenades and shit like that. I'm assuming that's where the tanks, like the tumbler from the Nolan trilogy, comes in handy. But I prefer like the actual, like cars. Like I have one right here, but I'm not going to try and reach through all the stuff I have to try and get to it. But yeah, I prefer the sports car ones. Just because I prefer it. But I prefer it when it actually has the bat motif to it, not just, a sports car with just two bat wings on it, which is almost sort of what this is. Anyway, so he gets in, and his, of course, Scarecrow has to tell him, like, of course, that's the point of your cars or whatever. So he says, "How's my old friend Simon Saint doing?" So he starts telling him, like, yeah, not particularly well. And then we switch over to, basically, the whole point of this entire book is just kind of to set up everything else that's going to be happening in the Bat books, going forward. So he's talking about how basically Miracle Molly ended up turning state's evidence on Simon Saint and gave up like all of the ways that he was kind of like encouraging them to commit like crimes against the media, and in exchange like all of her involvement was kind of like pardoned, but she still has to like serve time for the robberies that she committed. So he's saying she's in Blackgate now, no doubt recruiting the next generation of the collective for when she's free again. The rest of the collective has fallen off the grid. Even I haven't been able to pinpoint where they've set up inside the city. So Scarecrow even tells him, like, well, yeah, because you're not looking for them, to which Batman says, "I don't see them as a threat to this city. They're people looking for a second chance. They deserve the time and the space to build themselves one." So apparently he's just decided they're off limits. Anyway, he goes on talking about it, and like Scarecrow brings up to him, "Oh yeah, I heard that there's another dude running around calling himself Batman and everything." And the only thing Batman has to say about it is, "I'll take care of that in time." Motherfucker, when? Because we already heard that apparently Jace Fox and them, they're about ready to like move over to New York and leave you and your dusty ass there in Gotham. So when are you going to actually deal with this? You've never talked to him, you've never crossed paths with him. And he's walking around calling himself Batman. Or is he calling himself Next Batman? I honestly don't know. Which, how would that work if he's calling himself Next Batman? Like, I'm just imagining, like, when Batman has that whole line about, like, "I am vengeance, I am the night." Like, what is this guy really, what would his be? Like, "I am Revengeance, I'm Tomorrow Night"? Like, what the hell? Anyway, so Scarecrow tells him like he's evading and shit like that. And so Batman tells him Simon Saint has been removed from the board of Saint Industries, which has announced that it is shuttering the Magistrate brand. All that means is that they are going to auction off the technology Saint built to the highest bidder to use in foreign wars. Simon gets to be their convenient scapegoat, but his company will live on. The board is moving to release Saint on house arrest so that he can work off his debts to society under the careful eye of the United States military. And we can see where, of course, it's Amanda Waller meeting with them about the whole Magistrate technology and all that shit. So obviously she's going to have some sort of hand with those like power suits and shit that he had. Anyway, we see where they're continuing to drive, and there are more scarecrows just lining the streets and shit. So Scarecrow's telling him, "That must make you furious." He's like, "No, it means the people who funded Saint and pointed him in Gotham's direction are still out there. It means there's still work left to be done." So he's saying, like, "Well, that must go double for poor Sean Mahoney. I heard about that one from my cell in the GCPD." And here's where Batman gets silent, but it's because basically what ended up happening was they ended up trying to do surgery on him to remove all of the like enhancements and shit like that. And then he woke up and killed all of the doctors and shit. So, and they even freaked out because they're like, there's no possible way he should be able to wake up with the amount of sedatives we've pumped into him. But obviously he was able to do so. So he kills all of them. He breaks out of there. And then he manages to escape from the prison too, kills like the guards who try and stop him and shit, and then he escapes into the sewers. And then it's Batman saying, "I should have been there when they tried to remove Saint's technology. I tried to get him moved into Justice League custody. Someone made the decision to attempt it before that could happen." So it says, "I'll find out who in time, but Mahoney is gone. He's out of the city, that much I'm sure of." So Scarecrow's like, well, it wasn't all a waste then. So he says, he'll be back, of course. He's too dangerous not to come back. And he'll be carrying a grudge with him. So Batman's just like, yeah, I know. So Scarecrow tells him, every victory just makes things a little worse further down the line, doesn't it, Batman? That must terrify you. The entire city used to cheer your name. The police used to shine your light in the sky. But nobody looks up anymore. everyone's life gets worse and worse, and they know who is the reason why. So Batman plays into the game is like, that isn't true. So we're seeing where apparently this is why it's not true, because of course, yeah, they're still doing the whole Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn bullshit. And of course, Catwoman comes across them. She's just like, oh, very much kind of like the, that older mother who comes across that, like, the son and her gay child, or like her gay son with his boyfriend, and they're asleep. She's like, oh. She puts a blanket on them and just walks out of the room, and shit. Like very much, that was very, very much what Catwoman just did right there. Anyway, she walks out of the room, and then Gardner, who's Poison Ivy's ex, is saying like, well, they deserve it, they deserve to be happy and all that shit. So Catwoman is telling her like, yeah, they do. You said you call yourself Gardner, right? And she's like, yeah, you can call me Bella though. So she says, I just wanted to come down here and make sure the Ivy I protected all that time is still a part of this new Ivy. And of course, the lesbian overtones keep going here when Gardner says, that's the full, complete Pamela Isley. More herself than she's been in a long time. Yeah, I guess coming outs will have that effect, right? Anyway, now she just needs to decide what she wants to be to the rest of the world. She could have a powerful hand in shaping the future if she wants it, but for now she deserves a little bit of peace. So Catwoman just tells her like, yeah, whenever they wake up, tell them I stopped by, and if they're leaving or whatever, just tell Poison Ivy to come and stop by Alleytown and shit like that. So she asks her if she's going to be sticking around, and Gardner says, no, I've had enough of like the costumes and capes and all that shit. Like, I hate superhero cities. So she's like, all right, fair enough. Good luck out there. And she tells her, you too. So that's when Poison Ivy wakes up and comes across Gardner, and she's like, oh, Pamela, you're awake. And she's like, Catwoman says, she's like, yeah, I heard. I was listening and everything. So she says, I'll catch up with her in my own time. So she says, of course, it must be strange to be adjusting to your new body. It must be good to be whole again. So she says, it is. I gave a piece of my power up when I healed that child. My mind feels clearer than it has in years. So Bella at first starts telling her, like, I'm happy to hear that. But she's like, what that means is that I've had some time to think about what you did. You took part of my mind without my consent because you thought you knew what was good for me. So she's trying to give her the whole, like, well, I was just trying to help. And then Poison Ivy decides to give her this whole diatribe, saying, like, I'm not a hero, I'm not a villain, I'm just Poison Ivy. Like, I will do what is in my power to save this world in my own way, and I will make my own decisions on what I will become next, without you. So that's where we're leaving then. We'll see what ends up coming from that. Because then we go back over to Batman and Scarecrow. And he's just kind of like talking about your children, your little bat family, they must be horrified by the kind of people you've been running around with these days, what you've resorted to. So he mentions like this Ghost Maker, Harley Quinn, the Insanity Collective. These are dangerous, dangerous people. It must unsettle your family to see how your priorities have shifted. So Batman's telling him, I've seen through some of my old ways. I have rules, Scarecrow, and in my city my rules will be obeyed. But people can always change. They can always be better. So he's basically telling him, like, yeah, I'm a psychiatrist. I can assure you there are some people who never change. So this is where Batman takes the chance to tell him, it doesn't bother me that you disagree. There's a whole generation rising up, wary of authority and my symbol. They need heroes too, even if those heroes don't look the way I would choose for them to. So of course that takes us over to Clown Hunter, Simon Bow, or whatever, however you pronounce his last name. So he's over here fighting with like just some random thugs dressed up, in the whole clown get up and everything. So he's telling him like, I appreciate you making it easy for me because I didn't have to go looking for y'all. And then he introduces them to the Bat because it's a bat that has a batarang in it. So get it, Bat, in case you didn't know. He says, it's going to hurt you really bad. I'm really excited about that. So they all take off running for whatever reason, even though they have more numbers. So he's thinking it's for Clown Hunter. Come to find out from Batman, no, they're actually running because, I'm standing here. So they all took off. Anyway, so he's like, oh, hi, Batman. So Batman starts telling him, like, I hear you helped some of my allies during Scarecrow's attack. And he's like, well, yeah, I kind of would have been a butt not to do that, right? So he's saying, like, that doesn't mean I liked it or that I want to join up with your whole stupid world. I want to help people, but I think I have a better way to do it than you do. So he goes on yelling about him, saying, like, well, you're the reason why all of these, like, different clowns and other costume villains exist. Basically, he's giving the same, like, take people on Twitter have, like, every so often. Like, whenever a teenager, like, puts more than 5 seconds of thought into Batman, they're like, oh, so the villains only exist because Batman's there, right? That means Batman's the problem. Like, no, if you give it more than 5 minutes of thought, you'll be able to figure it out beyond that. Anyway, so that's when Ghostmaker kind of drops and he's like, you know what, kid, I agree with you. Like, I like the way that you think and everything like that. And he kind of sees through it, like, right at first. He's like, let me get this right. You probably want me to, like, train with him, right? You want him to be like my mentor and all that shit. So he says, "Are you trying to set me up to train with the guy who tried to kill me last year?" So that's where Batman tells him, "People can change. People can be lots of things. I can't control the future of Gotham City, Bao. It's going to keep changing, keep evolving. You have to be willing to accept change or it will kill you. But I won't stop fighting." That's when Ghostmaker's just like, "I'm going to go for the more visceral offer, rather than some dumb emotional plea. How would you like to learn how to fight with a sword instead of a bat? Only rule is you can't kill anybody, but you can still hurt them pretty bad. You want in?" So he's just like, "Alright, yeah, I'll give it a shot." So they continue driving. And again, like, there, if you aren't the type of person who's into, like, the art constantly changing, you're not going to enjoy this book at all. Anyway, so we go back over to Batman and Scarecrow. So he's saying, like, "I don't know what your point is," to which Batman says, "I'm not afraid of the future of this city, Scarecrow. I've seen it change so many times over so many years. I've seen it be many things, and I've had to become so many things to fight back against it. I have failed an impossible number of times, and I have won an impossible number of times. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but that doesn't scare me, not anymore." So Scarecrow tries to tell him, like, he's lying or whatever. But he says, "But it does scare you, doesn't it? It terrifies you. Some of the other villains have built new lives for themselves and moved on from villainy. Some of them doubled down and changed their methods, but you have never changed, and now you tried the biggest attack you ever dared on the city, and it failed. What more could you do? The same thing again, but bigger?" So he's saying, "You were so afraid of change that you tried to take control of everyone's future, push them through the fear state, make them evolve. I've been shaped by fear and trauma, and it has changed me many times. You have pushed yourself to the limits of fear, and you have never changed, never evolved." So he's saying, like, look around you. The fear state didn't, like, slow the city down. Everybody's getting back to their normal lives. Yeah, everyone was affected for a little bit, but you didn't really have the great effect that you thought you were going to have. So it says, "There was a time I thought I could control Gotham, but I know Gotham can't be controlled. It doesn't need me to evolve. It doesn't need Scarecrow to evolve either. It's just going to keep evolving with or without us. I'm excited to see what tomorrow brings. I'm going to save everyone it is in my power to save, but that is all I can do, and that doesn't scare me. And neither do you." So he's saying, like, again, you're wrong, you're lying, this is some kind of mind game. So he's like, "Well, I guess you'll have time to talk that over with your new therapist." So he arrives, and of course, in true Batman fashion, he throws him on the ground out of the car and then starts dragging him by the collar and shit. And takes him up to Dr. Chase Meridian. And so he's saying, like, yeah, he's right here or whatever. So he looks at her and he's like, Chase Meridian. So she says, "Dr. Crane, I look forward to speaking with you in more detail. I've read all of your work. It's deranged, of course, but deeply fascinating." So she tells the orderlies, like, go ahead and take him to his room and shit like that. And then she tells Batman, "I hope my new hospital can be a light to you as well, Batman. This all began with Arkham's destruction, and now it ends with its replacement. Some things never change in Gotham." To which Batman replies, "Maybe some things should." So, and that's the end. That is the end of the Fear State saga. And now we're going to go on to this whole Arkham Tower thing, which I honestly don't care about. I really don't. Like, them building, instead of having Arkham Asylum, it's like, oh, now we're going to put it in a nice skyscraper and shit like that. I'm like, why? I prefer the gothic, creepy looking Arkham Asylum, you know what I mean? But apparently now we have to put in Arkham Tower because I think that asylum is a word that has fallen out of use. Nobody really uses it anymore. It's almost like politically incorrect if you refer to something as an asylum. So, of course, we have to be very modern with this shit. We're going to go and put mental patients in a tower because that couldn't possibly go wrong, right? They're not going to be throwing people out of windows like from the very top or anything like that, I'm sure. I don't know. It's just all of this, like I said, the Fear State thing, it had potential. Like, it could have actually gone somewhere at the beginning. And it was just all squandered, Like, it was like they were trying to put in too many things all at the same time, and they just screwed the pooch. They shat the bed. Like, they tried to put too much into it together, and they had no idea how to make all of the pieces work in tandem. So it's like everything was just kind of, it never even felt like a combined storyline. It was just very disjointed. It was constantly taking, like, left turns every which way. So, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this. I'm wondering if they're actually going to end up combining all of this, like collecting it into like a trade or whatever, because I don't know how. Like, yeah, everything was titled Fear State, and I read like a bunch of the tie-ins. I didn't read all of them, but I read a bunch of them, and I was like, again, it just all felt very disjointed. It was like the whole thing was Scarecrow, but then at the same time, it was like the whole authoritarian, like city government type of thing, which doesn't really like mesh or whatever. And he even mentioned, Scarecrow even mentioned in there, like, yeah, Simon Saint tried to have handlers on me, But then at the same time, like I remember Simon Saint trying to make it seem like, well, Scarecrow doesn't control me. So I'm like, so who was the brains here? Because y'all are both acting like you were both trying to control each other, but you're both acting like each other was trying to control you, but you're trying to get the one over on that. Like, none of it really made all that much sense, and it wasn't even all that entertaining. So I don't really know what else I could possibly say about this. But yeah, that's the end of the Fear State, thank God. The next thing that they were mentioning right there at the end was that the whole Arkham Tower saga is coming next. So I don't even really know if I'm going to read that, just because I'm not interested. I'm really not. So I don't know. That's what we got from this. So I don't know if anybody read all of this all the way through. If you even read this issue, like, just feel free to share your comments with me down below in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely make sure you like the video, subscribe, make sure you are subscribed. If you would like to share the video, I do appreciate that, just so that we let other people know that, yeah, this event is over, in case you want to, like, maybe peruse the next issue or whatever. But yeah, feel free to share your thoughts with me down below. Share the video out if you would like. I do appreciate it. I always tell you that. But if you're done here, then go and read a book. Just probably stay away from the whole Fear State thing. And if not, then I'll see you on my next video.